You're live, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning and welcome to Legislative Facilities Tech and Process. Today is October 24th. If you would call the roll to kick us off, Mr. Frost.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is the Select Committee on Legislative Facilities Tech and Process. October the 24th, 2024. Senator Larson.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Co-Chairman Case. And Chairman Zwanitzer.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. First up today, Draft Amendment JR 14-1M. We discussed at our last meeting. Director Obrecht, you testifying from there? All right, floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, so in the meeting material is a proposed amendment to joint rules of the Senate and House 14-1M, paragraphs 2 and 3. And this, Mr. Chairman, is to require a longer notice period to members and the public for second and third reading amendments to the mirror budget bill. And if we look at the amendments to paragraph 14-1M2, it says, except as provided in Joint Rule 14-1M3, no amendment shall be considered on second or third reading of a mirror budget bill in the first house unless the amendment has been submitted to the legislative staff for preparation not later than the conclusion of the immediately prior reading of the mirror budget bill, and the sponsor has approved the text of the amendment and authorized the amendment to be numbered and distributed by 10 a.m. on the legislative working day succeeding the day of the immediate prior reading. So what we've got there, Mr. Chairman, are two deadlines. First, the amendment for second or third reading, if it's for second reading, it has to be submitted to the LSO Attorney's Office by the conclusion, if it's second reading, by conclusion of Committee of the Whole on the budget bill. If it's for third reading, by conclusion of second reading on the budget bill, and then approved for distribution by 10 a.m. the next morning. If we look at the new language at the bottom of that paragraph, the Legislative Service Office shall distribute to the members and the public all approved amendments as soon as practicably possible. A reading of the budget bill shall start not later than 24 hours after the deadline to approve amendments for that reading. So, Mr. Chairman, what we've got there is after the approval deadline at 10 a.m., LSO will need to do some formatting with the amendments approved. It'll depend on what amendments need deleted, what order they need to go out in. Amendments may have not been approved where prior amendments supposed they would have been approved, so we'll have to clean that up. It'll take us some time. How much time just depends on how many amendments we have, how many changes to those amendments. But I think it's important to note here that this rule as written doesn't provide for a full 24 hours of notice. It will be something less than 24 hours, probably in the ballpark of 22 to 20 hours, I would guess, on a normal second or third reading, say 70 to 90 amendments, 60 to 80 amendments. And simply, I drafted it like that, Mr. Chairman, because we're just in a time squeeze there. We really are on all sorts of things, on when we can get the amendments done, on when the requester and the sponsors of the amendment have enough time to be able to formulate them, look them over, get them back to us, and then also to get our readings done of the budget bill and then get into that JCC and get the bill down to the governor. That was just the time frame that we found to be most workable within this construct. The amendments to paragraph 3 of this subsection deal with the authority of the chairman of the Appropriations Committee to submit amendments after the deadline. Paragraph 3 would probably help if I just read it all now. Only the following amendments shall be submitted to the legislative staff for preparation on the day third reading of a mirror budget bill is to begin in the first house. Amendments to correct errors identified in the bill, correct errors in previously adopted amendments, and to transfer funds necessary to support the total appropriations contained in the bill, sponsored by the chairman of the Standing Appropriations Committee or his designee. So what that attempt to do is, what we attempted to do there is to cover all areas we could think of where either there's an error in the bill itself, in a previous amendment, or amendments require additional transfers of funds to be able to create a balanced budget within that budget bill. And so we do those, that budget balancer is always one of the last amendments that the chairman sponsors. But we also wanted to, and I think at the direction of this committee, clarify that the chairman's prerogative here to submit those amendments doesn't extend to substantive amendments, if you will. So that's it in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, questions? I can throw some at you then, Director. Let's say we have a special session, we don't get the budget approved this year, governor calls us in, we have to go in extra. Do these rules still apply, or you would immediately pass special session rules so we're not here for a month?
Mr. Chairman, if we were starting from scratch with no budget, these rules apply to that, to a special session as it would apply to a general or a budget session. So special rules would need to be adopted if that's what the bodies wanted to. You know, we've had a checkered history with that in the past. So, but if that's what the bodies wanted to do, yeah, we would draft a bill to get that done.
And then one more on this 24-hour rule from 10 a.m. You could still come into session before 10 a.m. Usually when we're reading the budget, right, you want to start at 9 or 8:30 so we can get through all the amendments. I believe this would still allow us to start early. We would just have other business and not be able to start the third reading or second reading of the budget amendments until that 24-hour, assumingly at 10:01. That'd be correct?
And it's not 24 hour. Well, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. It's that 10 o'clock is the 24-hour. Now the posting won't be for 24 hours. But you won't be able to start the next reading of the budget bill until 10 o'clock on a.m. on the next day.
Other questions, committee? Anyone online? Senator Larson, go ahead.
Gotta find the button. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to muddy it up much, but I worry about the amendments being due prior to the committee of the whole being, when it's finished. It's pretty difficult to listen to the debate and try to prepare an amendment. I wondered if we could delay that an hour or two. I don't know. I know that's not what the intent is, but or what's been written. That's my question.
Director Obrecht, let me make sure I'm correct. You have to ask for an amendment in some substantive way, but you'd still have until 10 a.m. the next day to fine tune it and get it to where it needs to be, as long as the concept has been submitted?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. The concept would need to be submitted to the attorney's office prior to the conclusion of the previous reading. So for second reading, prior to the conclusion of committee of the whole. And that deadline, frankly, is pushing it for us. Because let's say that Committee of the Whole goes till 9 o'clock at night. So we would only have then 13 hours to get all of those amendments done and ready for approval. And it will be a big time crunch. We'll be here late into the night to get that done. And then probably back again early in the morning too.
Any follow-up questions, Senator Larson? Okay, Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a technical point on the reference to the day of the immediately prior reading. Committee of the Whole is not a reading, but that's the implication. Unless I'm missing something. Is that adequate language?
Senator Case.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was thinking about the same thing. I think we could call it, it's definitely not a reading. You have the first reading of the budget bill, which is where it's, assigned or bypasses committee, signed directly to the floor. And so Committee of the Whole is, maybe we should say something about that, Mr. Olbrich, about prior reading or Committee of the Whole.
On line 2, it does say shall not be considered on second or third reading. But is there a rule or is it just customary to not allow amendments at all on first reading of the budget?
Mr. Chairman, there's actually a rule on no amendments on Committee of the Whole.
If you think we should amend that or?
Well, my point is the second reading comes after Committee of the Whole, and there's not a prior reading.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, technically very accurate. And you could say, I was already concerned about the length of this sentence, but for preparation not later than the conclusion of Committee of the Whole or the immediately prior reading of the mirror budget bill.
Yeah.
Or we could just say,
That would only be second reading.
yeah, we just say, or of second reading.
Because you're not preparing amendments after third reading. Unless it's
Probably after the mirror budget bill, then you need to stick in as applicable.
As applicable.
Well, because
it's either one.
we just need to clarify that it's either Committee of the Whole or second reading.
If you want to work on some language while I keep asking for comment, any other legislators? Not yet. Public comment on our discussion to amend 14.1M. Anyone from the public? I don't think there's anyone online, but let me double check. No one online. So we'll close public comment. And again, just to remind the audience, this will go before Management Council for approval, and then would go to both bodies individually that they would have to vote on because it is a joint rule. So both bodies would have to pass a rule if this committee approves it and Management Council approves it.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to get us started, I assume, Mr. Olbrich, we would just do an amendment to this to capture the Committee of the Whole second reading. So I would just go ahead and move this, changes to the general appropriation bill budget amendment request process, and make the motion.
Second.
And the motion is that we're going to submit this to Management Council and eventually both houses.
All right, moved by Senator Kaye, seconded by Representative Yin. Director Obrecht, you're going to work on some language, perhaps to present to Management Council in November. Any
Have you
other,
got anything now?
unless you have it now, Director Obrecht.
You know, we certainly understand the direction of the committee here. Let me work on this language and see if we can come up with something a little more concise.
Okay, well, I would just add that as a conceptual amendment that we would be trying to be more specific about including the day of committee of the whole. And basically, that's it.
Second. Is that a motion for an amendment?
Yeah.
For LSO to have it drafted and prepared
Yeah, so that the,
alongside? Go ahead.
we're given lots of leeway, but the idea was that that would be included.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of that amendment, say, I'm turning the mic on. Any discussion? Senator Rothfuss, go ahead. Nope.
You got me trying to vote, Mr. Chairman.
All right, all in favor of that amendment, please say aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that amendment's passed. Anything else before the vote? Seeing none.
Is it a roll call?
Is it a roll call, Anthony? Might as well be. Okay, because it's an official motion to Management Council. Go ahead. Who's calling a roll? Ryan? Mr. Frost, if you'd call the roll on amendments to 14-1M.
Mr. Chairman, a motion on the recommendation to Management Council on Joint Rule 14-1M. Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Case. Aye. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye. Okay, and you're more than welcome to come to Management Council in November. Otherwise, I'm sure Representative Yen or I would be happy to present at that time alongside Director Obrecht.
I wanted to come and visit the rarefied air.
With that, we're running ahead of schedule. Up to 9:30, 21-1C, proposed rule for requesting an enrolled bill. You'll find this on the second page of that packet. It appears that LSO has asked for it to be 21-1C. Director Obrecht, floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, again, this is a proposed amendment to the joint rules. It amends Joint Rule 21 by adding a subsection C. And I think, I tried to capture the committee's request at the last meeting. If a House bill or Senate file has been so heavily amended in committee of the whole or on second reading that the bill can no longer reasonably be understood, the House considering the bill may, by majority vote of the members present, request that the Legislative Service Office create a version of the House bill or Senate file containing all previously adopted amendments. The version of a House bill or Senate file with amendments incorporated under this subsection shall not be an official version of the bill and shall include a disclaimer so stating. All amendments to a House bill or Senate file shall be made the official version of a House bill or Senate file.
Committee, you'll remember a discussion from last month that this has been, it was used a lot more, a decade ago than I remember it lately, but kind of informally as a request. As we're getting more amendments and things are getting more complicated and we're moving quicker, this was again presented as a way to incorporate all amendments, because when you start having amendments on amendments on amendments, people can lose track of where they are and bad things can happen. Any discussion on the proposed 21-1C?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Case.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this effort. I think this is technically what we could do now by majority vote. I just want to be clear that we point out to people that this is a convention to aid in understanding of the bill and to track amendments in. It's not the official version, and it wouldn't have anything to do with how the official versions of amendments are actually developed. And I think it's also clear that this would not upset the timing, so that if there's going to be an enrolled bill produced, that we don't wait for that. It doesn't suspend the readings or the track of the official bill. Although, for example, in the Senate, we're very courteous about if we want to lay a bill back, and that I would expect that would apply. So I think this is a great effort. It kind of does what we wanted, and in a way, it's not new ground.
Let me throw some questions at you, Director. So I'd be correct if we heavily amended a bill in a committee, it would just be a substitute bill would be the motion on the floor. We wouldn't ever enroll a bill from a committee to first reading. Would that be correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, that if a committee decided that it had so heavily amended a bill, it could request a substitute bill, but only a committee can request a substitute bill. The floor can't request a substitute bill. Yeah, that's right.
Second question, I don't see it stated either way. Would this be public? So if we have a public motion to draft it, would you anticipate this would be listed on the website or being able to be handed out to members? I know Senator Case is nodding, but is that your intention as not an official work product? Do you want it publicly released, or are you just going to pass it out on people's desks to follow along?
Mr. Chairman, the intent is if we would hand this out on the floor to members, it would also be public. But of course, that adds even an extra level of potential confusion surrounding this bill. And also a technical question that we probably need to discuss that Jamie brought up to me this morning is how do we publish it to the website? And Jamie can probably talk about what that could potentially look like. But this wouldn't be drafted within our current drafting system. So there wouldn't be an automatic mechanism within that system to publish it to the website. And especially not on the bill's landing page itself. Now, there's probably workarounds to do that, and there's certainly other places we could publish those on the session page. You know, we usually create, if we have to, an other resources tab there on the session page when there's extraordinary, well, I think every year we do it for rule changes, proposed rule changes. So it could be published there quite easily, but I think we would have to do a little bit of programming work to get it onto the bill page itself.
Mr. Schaub, anything else to add? You're welcome to come up if you want. I guess if I call you up, you're going to come up. Thanks. Thoughts on if we make this public, if you could also get it listed within a day somewhere on our interweb. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, as our site is set up now, it would probably end up being a manual process to get it posted out there because when the bill processing group basically incorporates these amendments to do the enrolling, in order to publish it right now, we would overwrite the engrossed version, or the other version is the way it would be set up right now. So we would have to do a different process for that and have to have a label on it for clarification of what this actually is, what that document is, what the bill is. But the intent obviously isn't to overwrite the version of the bill. So there would be a little bit of work, but it'd probably be a manual process on our end.
I think I would be comfortable if it was just maybe in a central place, a tab of engrossed or enrolled bills, and you could have the disclaimer on the whole section there, as well as have the disclaimers on the individual bills, and not have it confusing the official record, not even have it listed with the options under the official record.
I would anticipate this is only going to be for the really complicated issues that people are interested in, and it would be sent far and wide. So if you publish it, every lobbying group and public affairs would send it to their members, and as long as Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we call this product an enrolled bill, and I feel like somewhere in the rule it should reference a title of what this product is, which doesn't have to be enrolled bill, but should be something so that it can be referred to in a way that is consistent with the rules. All it says right now, I think, is it's create a version. So the noun is version of the House bill containing all previously adopted amendments. Where did enrolled come from? I know that's been in use since certainly before I was in the legislature. It doesn't even really make sense to me. It sounds like it's a combination of engrossed and enrolled, which is not accurate. So any thoughts on that, what we could call this, so that there's a term of art in the rule where if we say, I move to create a so-and-so pursuant to this rule, what is the so-and-so that I'm creating?
Director Obrick, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I had heard that enrolled was a term of art that former LSO Director Dan Pauly had coined. But I asked him about that one time, and he said, no, you didn't come up with that.
He denied.
So I don't know where it came from, actually. Might have been. And you're exactly right. Enrolled is what we call a bill actually that has been engrossed and then amended in the second house. And it doesn't necessarily need to be engrossed. It just needs to be amended in the second house. And then we put those amendments into a bill for the Joint Conference Committee to be able to reference. And we've always just called that, since I've been here for 18 years, enrolling. I don't know what else to call this thing that,
May I
that we're trying to
suggest,
create.
as a working suggestion, just a tracked-in bill? Tracked-in version. Just as a working, maybe we'll come up with a better term for it.
And Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator.
I think something like that's appropriate. With enrolled, I do think that we have our own little term of art for what we mean by that, and Director Obrecht provided that with regard to conference committee necessity of seeing what it looks like. This rule could be utilized in the first chamber. If you had it heavily amended, for example, on the floor, you could be doing it prior to engrossing. So I don't think we want to confuse those terms and use enrolled. So tracked in draft or something like that it would make sense.
Omnigrold. I like the word omnibus. All right, well, if LSO would work on perhaps a term of art that we could memorialize in our rules for all time, to be able to make the motion correctly. We'll get to work on that, whether it's called tracked in, omnibus amendment, something. Other discussion on the concept from the legislators? Saying none. Public comment on 21C, or Jamie, did you have anything else to add? Sorry, I left you up there. Go ahead.
I don't have anything else, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for staying on the hot seat. Other public comment on 21C. I see AARP making his way. Welcome, Mr. Laycock. Floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer and committee, and big thank you to LSO, Matt and your group for putting together what seems to be a pretty nice option. I can see a number of instances by which we could use something like this from time to time when I'm talking to legislators, especially in the lobby, and I say, here's what the bill says, and they say, that's not what we read, so we gotta, read in some of the amendments just right. And so the only question that I would have, and is actually a little bit similar to what Chairman Zwanitzer just asked, was that question about if it's heavily amended in committee, but doesn't bring out a substitute bill. But we're still kind of sensing that confusion. Is there any appetite or willingness to add in, amend, after in the line 2, after amended in committee, comma, and then committee of the whole, second or third reading, just in case, we get to that point where we're seeing, okay, where we're really seeing some confusion on this particular bill, since some committee amendments, and at least offer the option for the body to vote whether or not they want a enrolled attraction, whatever we want to call it. I think we should have a legislative contest to rename this particular term. Winner gets to be the speaker for 5 or 6 bills, something like that. But that would be the question that I would pose to the group.
Any questions for Mr. Laycock? Seeing Senator Case hitting his mic, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I can say is, it might be a useful tool for that. I'm not sure how much work the LSO wants to get into. Committees can also have the tool of a substitute bill, which does track in those changes. And the standing committee amendment becomes this new Bill X. And that works for the purpose, but it's an all or nothing proposition, and it's not a thinking piece, it's the proposal. I don't mind this being available to committees. Sure it is already, but.
Mr. Chair, but I don't know that I see a situation where this particular vote is going to come up more than once or twice a year, I hope.
Yeah. Let's see, Mr. Obrecht, is it a workload issue if committees were to request it?
Director?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, committees can already request a substitute bill.
Right.
So, and then let's say the committee didn't request one and their amendment was adopted, well, then that would have been adopted in committee of the whole. So I think this rule already covers that situation.
You're saying, but, Mr. Chairman, then you'd have the tracked-in version after the adoption in committee of the whole.
That's right.
I think what Mr. Laycock's saying is it'd be nice to have it actually before. It'd come early in the process, but if this makes me pause a little bit, maybe we should walk before we run.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I mean, yeah, my big concern with this whole thing is twofold. One, workload on staff,
Right?
and two, confusion.
Yeah.
And if you start putting out versions where, oh, you might have a substitute bill, or you might have whatever this thing is, and a committee and besides first reading of the bill, nobody's even seen the actual bill yet,
Right?
or considered it. I would just be hesitant to put out a different version already.
Gotcha.
And I would think when you have multiple amendments over and over in a committee, it still gets morphed into the standing committee amendment where all of those get integrated into one standing committee amendment. So either
Substitute bill.
it's either enough to be a substitute bill or it's a standing committee amendment, even if we've amended it 17 times, it still gets finalized into language to the floor.
And I guess the other point is, this is for adopted amendments. So there would be no adopted amendments yet.
Fair enough.
And you wouldn't know what would all be adopted on committee of the whole. Might not pass the standing committee amendment, might pass the standing committee amendment plus 4 other amendments. Right.
So,
Other questions?
Maybe try to nudge him out of here.
Oh, we're happy to keep you as long as you want, Tom. Any other thoughts while you have the floor?
Mr. Chairman, thank you to you guys, LSO, for putting forth the effort. We do appreciate it.
Thanks. Other public comment on 21-1C, format of bills and amendments? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion on the floor?
Move the bill, or move the proposed change?
Okay, moved by Senator Case.
Second.
Seconded by Representative Yin. Discussion committee. Anybody want to come up with a name for this now, or we'll task LSO to come up with a?
Rothman's got his hand up.
Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that was just what I was going to address since we did a conceptual motion last time to ask LSO to look for an amendment, I'd make a similar motion here to ask LSO to look for a small amendment to provide a term of art.
That works for you, Director? There's only 8 of us who even remember the word enrolled, so you could kick it off with something
Tracked in,
trendy.
tracked around,
Omnitract.
crooked track.
If you can use the word tranche somehow, let us know. Any further discussion? Seeing none and question being called, Ryan, if you'd call a roll call on a motion to Management Council to amend Rule 21-1C in the joint rules.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Case. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye.
6 aye, Mr. Chairman.
All right, knock that out. Committee, our next thing's not till 10. Let me see online. I knew we had two other people who contacted me that they would be joining for our 10 o'clock discussion. I do not see them online yet. So perhaps we can take a 15-minute break. Let's come back at 9:50.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
sorry, real quick. Would you mind going back, and we didn't approve the minutes from the last meeting at the beginning?
Sure, we could do the
Take care of the
minutes.
Thank you.
Approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Boy, minutes.
Third thing in the packet committee were the minutes from our meeting in September. Any additions or changes? Not hearing any. There's a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second, moved by Senator Kaye, seconded by Representative Yen. Further comment, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes from last meeting, say aye.
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 Raise your hand. Thanks. That looks like a 6-0 approval, Mr. Sarah. Thank you for catching that for me. All right, with that, let's stand adjourned or recessed until 9:52. And we'll think of some terms of art to come up with for the rules. You okay with background on there? I gotta get a cool mic like Rob just has.
You do.
30-second warning. All right, we'll get started as soon as everybody takes their seats. Hannah, Leo, everybody ready? All right, let's come back into session. I think everybody else is online again. With that, next on our agenda is Management Council Draft Policy 10-1, Media Credentialing Criteria and Conditions. I know Senator Larson asked us to review some of the things we talked about at our past meeting. I know Senator Case, this official request came from you as a co-chairman of this committee. Would you like to kick us off?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And yes, indeed, I think all of us thought about this policy after we left, but I did hear indirectly from Senator Larson. We had a little trouble linking up directly, but indicated a desire to have this revisited on the agenda. How we proceed with it, we could talk informally. Senator Larson could make a formal motion to reconsider. I think that's still in order. Or we could do that at the appropriate time. We could just talk about it first. So with that, that's just a preface. I think it's healthy that we give this a visit.
So before entertaining any specific motion, Senator Larson, thoughts? Maybe we'll just have
Yes,
some
Mr.
conversation and go from there. See what the committee
Yes,
wants to do.
Mr. Chairman. I would kind of like to talk about it informally and not make a motion at this point. As you all know, there's quite a lot of chatter out there in the media that we've taken away a big item for them to be able to be on the floor taking pictures. So I thought about it a little bit more and visited with Director Obrecht about this. And some of the questions I asked him was, can they internally maybe take photographs that the media could use? I think mainly that's what they wanted, was some pictures of the legislators on the floor doing work, so they could use them during the year, I guess. And I might have a director comment about that in a bit. The other option I visited with him is there a possibility of just saying that they'll the areas where they would take pictures from maybe could be open just a couple days during the session. And I think we definitely want to make sure that, I think during special occasions, there are photographers that are on the floor or in the doorway taking pictures of when we have our federal delegation show up. We wouldn't want to stop that, I think. So that was a couple things I visited with the director about, and now with the group, and maybe those are options. I don't know. So that's all I have.
And certainly, Director and Chief Clerks, when we have special guests, You know, our US senators, presentations on the floor, they're usually accompanied by someone taking photos of the event, but I doubt we media credential our senatorial staff or when the veterans come or breast cancer. Is that just generally allowed? I don't know through what policy, but let's start there with, is there any prohibition? If they're an invited guest onto the floor, we allow people to take photos? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think that if that is going to happen, yeah, it's either a member of that group or LSO staff will take those photos as well.
And any other thoughts on Senator Larson's comments on, we hate to call them restrictions to the press, but if there are certain days or times, I think maybe to rehash the conversation, we do credential 50 to 60 people each session. And so technically we would allow at any given time, 30 or 40 people to be on the side hallway, taking photos through one door, blocking the legislative restrooms. And I think that's at the last meeting, what we said, do they need to be in those two spaces? I do think the article came out in the paper that we were trying to restrict. I think one of the headlines was no media in the state capitol, which was a little past the pale of, I think, what this committee attempted to do to say, you can't stand between the legislative bathrooms and a doorway taking photos. But if there are cases, I don't know if we've looked at what other states do. I mean, we certainly have not allowed the media in break rooms, in bathrooms. The question is, do we allow them in the hallway between the bathroom and the legislative floor to take photos? Thoughts on that, what other states have done, or based on the comments you've heard, can we refine this policy? Open to any thoughts you have.
Mr. Chairman, I think any access beyond the bar to the House or Senate is extraordinary access for any member of the public or of the press. You know, there's no set criteria or uniform access among all 50 legislators on almost anything, including this. I mean, anecdotally, there's only ever one photographer at a time that is in those areas of either the House or the Senate. And Mr. Chairman, so it's not like there is a mass of photographers that are allowed back there. It's only one person at a time.
But is that in our rules somewhere?
Mr. Chairman, no, that is where the legislative information officer will make sure that that's the case. And to my knowledge, we've never had any problem with anyone requesting more than that at a time either.
Let me clarify that. We've never had any problems with people agreeing to be in a rotation or not having more than one at any given time. I do think we've certainly had some issues and concerns arise with having photographers there this past session, without going into more detail. But when you say we haven't had any problems or issues, it's been on people agreeing to only have one photographer at any given time?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what I meant, yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I confess I was hoping that we might go a little bit farther than the proposals that have been made by Senator Larson, although I appreciate it. I don't think that we can think in our minds that having our own staff produce internal photos is somehow a substitute for press photographers being able to look and compose and think and try to tell a story and try to convey what's happening. I think they're not even substitutes for each other. One is our own PR. Misinformation could be labeled misinformation, most flattering possible information. The other is real-time nitty-gritty, which I think has a lot of value. The other time is to say only on special events or only at special times. I think some of the most dramatic images that come out for our people are the non-special times, you know, the late night when somebody's still there and catching that image. Or, I mean, that's news, and that's the drama of the legislature. I think by trying to move photographers off the floor, we've cut into that realism and connection, and we've isolated ourselves from the press. And so I was hoping we might go down the road of actually reconsidering this motion and just leaving it alone and going back to what we had. I obviously was not on the prevailing side, so I'm not able to make the motion, but I reached to people that were on the prevailing side and think that maybe they have thought about this more and might offer that we reconsider this.
Any discussion? Senator Rothfuss. We'll take public comment after all the legislative comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And you know, hearing feedback on this, I was not a strong supporter. I was just a supporter. I thought good arguments were made in favor of this policy change, and we didn't hear a lot of objection at the time. So I was comfortable making this policy recommendation. Since that time, obviously, there have been serious concerns that have been raised, and I don't think the value of this policy change rises to a level that justifies overcoming the concerns that have been raised. And I would be one that would be happy to make the motion to reconsider and change my vote based on the concerns that the public have provided. It's not a critical enough policy change based on the interests that led to the policy recommendation that we would push back on the public interest that has come forward as a result of it. So when the time's appropriate, I'm happy to make that motion to reconsider.
So let me check one more time, Director. There is some type of internal policy about only having one person on any chamber floor at a given time, and that's in effect in the rules. And we haven't had any controversy on two photographers wanting to be on the same bill. And I can ask Mr. Sarah as well. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so just to clarify a couple things, it is accurate that we do have 50 to 60 journalists that we do credential every session, but that includes reporters. That's everybody. That doesn't, so only a handful of those are photographers. Only photographers are allowed into the chamber on the second floor, so reporters are not. So that obviously diminishes the pool dramatically of that 50 or 60 that we talk about. It's really self-policing as far as, you know, Matt's right, Director Obrecht is right. We don't have people piled on top of each other taking photos at those doors. It's usually one or two at a time. It's, like I said, self-policing. They're, as far as we know, courteous to each other, and they allow them to get their photos. The sergeant at arms and the doorman are also instructed, and the House Chief Clerk is here as well as the Senate Chief Clerk is online. But they are also asked to keep an eye on photographers to ensure they're coming in, getting the photos that they need, and then are leaving in sufficient time to ensure that we're getting people in and out, rotated in and out, as well as the policy does restrict them from lingering in the hallways. And I think for the most part, photographers, a combination of photographers, self-policing, as well as our sergeant at arms and doorman do a good job of that.
Well, if it ain't broke, why are we fixing it? So I sense there's a motion coming on, but unless there's any other comments, we'll take some public comment for a bit as well. And then after that, Senator Rothfuss, I'll let you get to the mic first to make a motion. But until then, Chief Clerks, I know the Senate Chief Clerk was on a time crunch. House Chief Clerk, anything you want to say? Okay. Other public comment on the potential of revising our media credentialing criteria and condition policy? Seeing no immediate public comment. Oh, Master Copeland. I see you have a hand raised. I just don't see you. We'll bring you in here. Somebody else can do it before I can.
You guys see him on your screen?
Promote to panelist. Got it. Give it about 10 seconds. And we'll let him and that adorable dog have the floor. So with that, Mr. Copeland, the floor is yours.
You know, I never trust myself with the technology.
There it goes. I think you can hear us now. Mr. Copeland, floor. There you go. Welcome.
I can, and I promise I am not, in fact, an adorable dog. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today against the proposed rule changes. As the chief executive and editor of WildFile, Wyoming's only independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit public interest news agency, and on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of Wyomingites who rely on our reporting, I'd like to say that any restriction to press access in the Capitol is a restriction on the people's access to the government that represents them. The transparency and accountability provided by the independent free press are critical checks and balances to government misconduct, government ineptitude, and yes, in the extreme, government tyranny. These are not my ideas. They come straight from America's founders, and they are enshrined in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. In fact, as I'm sure you know, the press is the only profession explicitly named and protected in the United States Constitution. I repeat, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. That was not a mistake. In the words of Thomas Jefferson, quote, our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. Make no mistake, what's being proposed here is in fact a limitation. It's been argued that the legislature can, with its cameras and microphones, provide the requisite transparency itself. It cannot. By focusing solely on active speakers, chamber-mounted cameras miss more than they capture. They omit, for example, all of the context happening around the individual at the microphone. Who's huddling together in the corner? Who's bouncing their leg in agitation? Who's furiously scribbling notes? Who's nodding in approval or shaking their head in opposition? Who's busy texting on their phone? The people of Wyoming have a right to know. Likewise, such context and detail can't be adequately captured from the gallery. So much of human communication is nonverbal. As humans, we're wired to gather enormous amounts of information from facial expressions, posture, and body language, most of which is lost in an aerial view. But more to the point, the idea of the legislature exclusively covering itself flies in the face of press independence and the fundamental logic that underpins our system of checks and balances in representative government. One need only apply the same logic to a different institution to highlight its absurdity. In closing, I'll offer a brief rhetorical exercise. Which of the honorable committee members is ready today to let Congress decide for you which images you do and do not see of the conduct in that Capitol? I suspect that none of us think that's a good idea. And I think that we can also all agree that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Thank you again for your time, consideration, and of course, your service to our state. I urge you all to reconsider your support for the proposed restrictions, and I'm willing to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Any questions from the committee for WildFile? Not seeing any. Certainly appreciate you coming today, and those are some great words. And I think we all agree we probably wouldn't trust Congress, so why should we trust ourselves sometimes in this regard? Have a great day. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Other
you.
public comment? Yep. Let me check press, looking around at all the press. You're all here? Okay. Not seeing other public comment. Senator Rothfuss, at this point, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, voted on the prevailing side. I move for reconsideration of the Select Committee's recommendation regarding Management Council Policy 1001, subject media credentialing criteria and conditions at this time.
Let me ask for a second, then I'll have a question for you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, I think, Representative Banks. And so, Senator Rothfuss, are you asking for a complete rescission of all of the credentialing policy, or only those in regards to the camera crews and 3A2, 3A1 and 2?
Well, the motion, Mr. Chairman, would be to rescind the entire recommendation. I think it would then be in order afterwards if anybody wanted to make a new motion to move forward. I mean, the only one that seems to remain would presumably be the credentialing on bloggers or something like that. I think that's the only thing left. But my motion is a full reconsideration and withdraw of that recommendation.
Okay. That's the motion on the floor, committee. Any further comments, amendments, discussion? Senator Case?
non-debatable, I think.
Oh, it's for us to revisit it? Two motions, that sound correct, Director Obrecht? The first motion would be to take up a reconsideration. The second motion would then be if we want to alter. Okay, so I'll,
Just one timeout.
you just told me it's not debatable. Well, go ahead,
The
Senator Case.
reconsideration is not debatable. The question is, what do we do after that? We could just revisit that original motion, or we could agree among ourselves to have leeway if we wanted to tweak and produce something else. But we could do that. But right now, this motion is not debatable.
And Mr. Chairman, as a point of order, it's an aye vote for the reconsideration, and then it would open the vote back up to its original standing on whether or not you want to support the Management Council policy recommendation.
Correct. So with that, an aye vote would be to review and reconsider our policy from last meeting would be the first starting point. So all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's unanimous. So now, Senator Case, do you have a next motion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm just asking for a step down, a little leeway here. Normally, what you do right now is re-vote what we just voted, and it would be a no vote. If there's anything we want to salvage about that, we could do it subsequent. I think that would be fine. I don't see why not. It's still in the possession of the committee. So I think that's probably the cleanest thing to do. And then this would be to just put on the table the proposed policy change, and I would urge the members to vote no.
So can you state that in the form of a motion for me, just for the record?
The motion's open because we opened it.
I think the
The
motion's
motion is
been
to
made.
reconsider, and you're asking us to vote no on all changes that we made at the last meeting, correct?
Mr. Chairman, we did have a motion to reconsider. We just approved that. So now we're actually effecting the reconsideration, and I would ask the members to vote no.
Director Obrecht, that sound correct as a parliamentary procedure? Motions on the table, we're voting no in regards to any of the previous changes, correct?
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, that's right. You just had a motion to reconsider what you've approved. So now you've got the previous motion
Right.
before you, and then it is if there hadn't been a vote taken.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, that's my motion technically.
Okay, so voting on Senator Roth's motion, an aye vote keeps all of the amendments we made at the last meeting, and no vote takes them all out. Any questions on that? Seeing none. All in favor of keeping the current amended language?
Mr. Chairman, I think that'd be a roll call since we did a roll call last time.
We can certainly.
In the minutes that we approved.
Representative Yen would like to correct the other minority leader saying it was a voice vote, but,
On the
or it
minutes,
was a
yeah.
roll call, but
Mr. Chairman, in the minutes that we approved very recently, it was a voice vote at our previous meeting.
Yeah, I don't
think
believe,
it
I
matters
don't believe the
either way.
press actually had, they had to do some scouting around to find who the no's were. But I'm
My
fine.
apologies.
I request a roll call. That's
It's
fine.
roll calls are great. All right, Mr. Frost, if you'd call a roll call on amendments to the media credentialing policy.
Senator Larson,
No.
Senator Rothfuss,
No.
Representative Banks,
No.
Representative Yin,
No.
Co-Chairman Case,
No.
Co-Chairman Zwanitzer.
No.
6 no, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case, looks like you want the floor. Go ahead.
Well, so that failed, Mr. Chairman. So now if there's anything people want to resurrect from that issue, this would be a ripe time to do that.
I believe as Senator Roth has said it, the only thing not related to photography for the press on the floor was C, on credentials not being issued to individuals who merely say they're writing a personal online blog.
Mr. Chairman, looking at it, it looks like 2C also talks about badging
Each year.
related issue.
So I guess committee, if anybody would like to bring either of those up, or Director, let's start with Director Obrecht. Go ahead on why they may be needed or why they were proposed originally.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I remember what I said at the last meeting, see, personal online blog is, you know, a bit of a dated term. It really doesn't limit, doesn't add anything to the definition of media currently, and it adds some confusion. So that's why we propose C be removed, 1C. 2C also, actually, I think we just reissued badges or get new badges every year.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. That's just to reflect a internal change that we made.
Yep. And then the other change we asked for was in paragraph 7, in order to provide a convenient full-time contact for the media, LSO will serve as liaisons between the media and the House and Senate Chief Clerk. It may not necessarily be the LSO information officer.
Yep, good.
I think I would be good, and Senator Rothfuss, I don't want to steal your thunder or anything, but I would offer all the changes, except for the changes for the use of credentials in 3. So I would offer all the proposed changes that were made.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Larson. Further discussion? Let me double check. I guess it's a motion. Any public comment on
Yeah,
that?
and let's be clear here. There's 2 subparagraphs, Mr. There's House conditions and Senate conditions. And so those would not change as well, because those seem to affect photography.
Yeah, that's right. So the only changes would be changes in paragraph 1, 2, and 7.
Agreed, that would be my motion.
They're primarily cleanup. Okay, and that second still holds.
Senator Larson had his
Okay.
hand up.
Senator Larson, other discussion? Go ahead. Nope.
He's good.
Any public comment on those changes? Seeing none. Further discussion committee? All right, all in favor of those changes, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be unanimous. Anything else on the do I still need a full vote on a resubmission to Management Council for this, Director Obrecht?
I think we just did.
That was a vote for those changes and, okay,
We clear on that? Yeah.
sounds like we're clear.
Yep.
With that, gets us up to 10:30. We're at roll call displays, electronic voting history. Ms. Madsen, welcome. Do you want the floor to kick us off? This was a request at our last committee meeting.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could do a preface on this?
Probably, go ahead, Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I learned some stuff in this process when Senator Larson was talking about wanting the information at the desk, exactly what the presiding officers had. I was like, what do they have that we don't have? So I actually did look into it, and there is, in the House, it's more common practice for the presiding officer to actually be able to see the screen of the chief clerk as it's being done, and I didn't. And in the Senate, there's a toggle switch underneath the presiding officer's desk that would allow for the same thing, but I'm not aware that anybody's done that since a couple presidents ago. So, Senator Larson, I learned something from you about this. Maybe we're all going to learn together now as we go down this path a little bit. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Ms. Madsen or Mr. Schaub, whichever one of you wants to kick us off. Wendy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what I will do is provide some brief history. The 2015 comprehensive survey of 67 of the 99 legislative chambers across the country responded to, and it was a comprehensive survey led by this committee. And it had originally been conducted in 2008 and updated in 2015. And it really was soup to nuts what's going on in chambers relating to voting rules, voting procedures, voting technologies. And you were provided with that. You requested at the last meeting whether or not NCSL could update that data. That is actually a very heavy lift because of the comprehensiveness of that survey. But in visiting with the co-chairman, the thought was that this was still a nice primer to make sure everybody is on the same page when we say electronic voting. That can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And so the chairman requested that we essentially provide the 2015 survey for context. We have asked NCSL, and you have available to you a very brief update to that survey. In a month's time, they pretty much took the chambers that responded. We had about a quarter of the chambers respond to a very narrow set of questions that were related to Senator Larson's request about display boards in the chambers. So that information is also available to you, and we'll go through that. But to get started, it's really important first to talk about terminology. So the first thing is, what is this all about? It's about your votes as members and how you cast those votes. So when we start with voting itself, it's important to realize that all of this derives from your rules, your procedures, constitutional requirements, statutory requirements. And so technology used in state legislative chambers is a tool. The technology doesn't drive the rules and procedures. The rules and procedures drive the technology. So that's kind of an important caveat, because sometimes there's a misconception that, well, if you have an electronic voting system, all votes are recorded. Your recorded votes are based on what your rules and procedures dictate. So that's kind of a first, just a little bit of a definitions there of what that means. Obviously, there's voice votes that aren't recorded. And that's true in states that have a truly 100% electronic system and states that have a truly 100% manual system. So a voice vote can be captured electronically. It basically means it's not a recorded vote, or it can be audibly. You can vote by division, and you can do a roll call vote. And a roll call vote is a recorded vote that will end up in your official proceedings and track how each member individually voted. In states that have fully electronic systems, those are systems where the member votes either from their desk, they are casting their vote not audibly, but they're casting their vote either through buttons at their desk, or some states and more states are now going to a wireless system, or they may cast their votes at a rostrum or some system where they go use a key card or fingerprint technology. Those votes are captured electronically. And then in a moment, we'll talk about distribution of those votes. Other states have what's called a combination system. And the combination system is the one that Wyoming has. And in your recently updated survey, this is what the Washington State Senate is also using. And in Wyoming, we like to say that you have an electronic voting system with an oral roll call tradition. So what that means, as you all know, and so this is partially education for others, is what that effectively means is you have to be present, typically present in the chamber, and you, when you are casting your vote, the chief clerk is capturing your audible vote in an electronic system. And that's what we call our roll call system that you are all familiar with, and that's what Co-Chairman Case was just mentioning, that in the House and Senate have the capabilities to be seen at the dais by the presiding officer or the chair. So when those votes are captured, either because you are pressing buttons or you are audibly giving your vote, the next part of the discussion about an electronic voting system is how and where are those votes displayed? And in 2015, Wyoming was actually considered a leader by the National Conference of State Legislatures in how transparent you were with recorded roll call votes. Because at that time, and it's a lot of testament to the LSO IT staff, we were one of the first states in the country to actually take the recorded roll call by the chief clerk in that electronic system and distribute it to the website. And your committee actually led the efforts to do that. We have found from the recent survey results, again, only a quarter of states responded, but by and large, those chambers are also now distributing their recorded votes to the website. So Wyoming was kind of the first out of the gate there and a leader. So it's also important, it's a misconception that if you have an oral roll call, that means it's not distributed. You can have an oral roll call, and that is separate from how those votes are distributed. So some of these states have caught up. Other states still do a process where they don't put the votes out on the website. They're compiling them either in a daily journal, and we don't know how many states are still waiting till the end of their session to compile those. And then the final, and I shouldn't say final, there's other ways to display, but your final discussion for today, and that's where I'm going to turn this over to Jamie shortly, is how votes are displayed in chambers themselves or in Capitol buildings. And so there's a number of states that are displaying on boards similar to what you see here, or the traditional, we used to call them scoreboards, where they actually lit up with lights, and those are capturing the votes in the chambers themselves. When you are displaying votes in the chambers, this is also driven by rules and procedures. Some of those states, and you'll see from the current survey, some of those states are displaying the votes as they are occurring and as the tally changes. Some of those states are only showing them once the vote has been closed by the chief clerk, and then they'll display individual member results, individual members voting in final results. Some of them only display the final vote result. So there's really, I guess this primer is essentially for you to understand there's a lot of variety in ways to do things. And I would just leave you with two thoughts, which is that, you know, as you're thinking through what you would like to do with your systems is what problems are you trying to solve? One of the questions at the 2015 survey was there's a perception that, well, if everybody voted from buttons, you would actually be able to do faster roll calls. And what we found by and large is voting takes a certain amount of time. And if you have a truly electronic system, the decision is really made by, again, your rules and procedures. Those dictate how long a roll call will remain open. And then in Wyoming, as you all know, the vote is a pretty efficient process. It's not left open for a certain period of time. It's open for the amount of time it takes the chief clerk to call the roll and close the vote. So that's one caveat. And then the second caveat is that the number of recorded votes in Wyoming was actually higher than some of the states that had a truly electronic system. And that, again, is derived from your rules and your procedures. And again, you know, Wyoming has, we like to say that every state legislature is the same and every state legislature is different. So it's really dictated by your rules, your procedures, your customs, and your traditions in your respective House and Senate chamber here in Wyoming. So I hope that provides kind of a 30,000-foot view. Jamie has some more details about the specific request about display of votes in the chamber itself, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about the history or the update that we just did with NCSL on the very limited question about displays in chambers.
Any immediate questions for Ms. Madsen
Mr. Chairman.
on where we are in other states? Yeah, go ahead, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to commend Ms. Madsen for work in this area and all of our staff. I think I'm just sitting here, you do such a nice job of telling that history that we have been through. And I think it was quite accurate, and I like that we separate out some of these terms and be more precise about it, because you know, there are definitely states that have electronic boards in the chamber, but they actually record fewer votes than we do or make them available in a less timely manner. So, you know, it's surprising. It's a tool that talks about how it can be used. The only point that I might ask is that you explain, and maybe this would be a segue into Jamie's presentation. Once the votes are collected by the clerk, what happens next and how does it go out to the world? And of course, we learned earlier that it is possible for the presiding officers to see that same screen at the same time. And I want to ask a question about that down the road, whether we could share that with the world. So what happens after the roll call is closed?
If you want that one, Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, Mr. Chairman, I'll probably turn this over to Jamie. My knowledge in this area is now going on about a decade old, but I think Jamie can get you up to speed on what's currently occurring in each chamber.
Perfect. Good job. Thank you.
Good handoff. With that, go ahead, Mr. Schaub.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, so when the chief clerk closes the roll call, it basically generates a file that then is imported into our legislative management system. And as soon as that action's posted, once that's acquired, it goes out to the website. So the delay from when the votes close to when it hits the website is just the timing of the floor computer clerk posting that action, whether it's like third reading, final passage, failed on third reading, whatever that action happens to be.
To follow up, the real time we're talking about, we're literally talking about seconds or less than a minute. Would that be fair, or is it longer than that?
It would depend, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, it would depend on if the timing of the floor computer clerk, if that person is totally caught up on their work, it could be seconds. If there's a few things that are going on, sometimes there is a delay. If on the same bill, there's a divided amendment and we're waiting
Right.
for something from like the attorney's office or whatever. But typically on just a regular bill, it's within a minute or probably less.
Okay. So, and Mr. Chairman, that is one standard that we have to think about, that we're actually doing very well. Making these votes available to the public effectively immediately. There's a delay because we use a manual input and then she gets to see her screen. And when she says vote closed, that's when, and if she's got questions about votes, like that you might see her pause and say, Senator so-and-so, would you repeat your vote? Because they didn't quite get it right. And so they wait till all that's done and they're satisfied with it and they push the button. And at that point, it's on its route to be published to the world. There might be a slight delay depending on the workload of the clerk, but we're literally talking seconds to minutes. Got that right, right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any more on the internet process?
Mr. Chairman, what was kind of discussed, I guess, really at the last meeting was Senator Larson was talking about a voting board or display within the chamber that members or the public could see, similar to what the presiding officers were able to do. As the committee's probably aware, is we rebuilt or rewrote the voting system several years ago. Previously, that roll call system was built around like 2000. It might have been a Y2K project. I'm not sure. But we had serious limitations with what we could do with that. But when we built this new voting system several years ago, pretty much every year somebody has brought up display boards for the last 15 years since I've been here. So even though we weren't using display boards, we built the new voting system to be able to handle that type of process if the body decided to do that. So since we had designed it in that way, it was like a pretty straightforward enhancement to the system to be able to have a voting board within the chambers. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been working on that. And I have an example to show you what it would look like in the chambers based off of what current technology we have today. Let me just plug in my laptop and I could show you the screen.
And while you're doing that, it is fair to say we have wired at least in the House, both sides, there would be an area to have a board. There's electricity, and we did use it even during COVID. And we had some presentations, I remember, to have screens come down and have some wiring there in case it was something we wanted to do in the future. I think you need to make Mr. Schaub a co-host so he can share a screen.
I think the source needs to be the staff table input, so you could see my screen.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. The Senate did elect as part of the capital restoration project to install display boards that are similar to these. In the Senate, the House is wired for that, but elected not to hang display boards at this time.
Do I need to do that click share then? I thought that, just one moment, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, while they're working this out, I want to reach out to Senator Larson and say, I really did learn something about the ability of the presiding officer to have sort of an inside track on the vote listing. And we've always done that by hand, and I thought that's why way everybody did it. But I'm throwing out there that we could do these display boards and they look nice. The downside to the display board, as I've seen it in action in other chambers, including in the Congress of the United States, is they put the board on the wall, then they begin to manipulate the rules about inputting the votes. And then you get people that'll change their votes and it's left open for a period of time. It becomes common to leave it open while somebody comes from their office, or they'll flip their votes back and forth. And then it becomes kind of a circus. And then it's a problem where your vote is really more what the PAC's doing. So I'm reaching out and I'm thinking maybe we could have a system where we make that same display open to the public at the same time. That looking over the clerk's shoulder, that goes out to the world. We could all have it on our desk, on our computer, without having a board, and we keep for now the same voting rules we have, but we make the display available rather than this, which I just see this going down the road of being gamed, because the most immediate thing is, all right, what's the rule about keeping this open? What's the rule about inputting from your desk? What's the rule about making changes? And then we've got kind of a circus going on at some point. That's my fear. I didn't mean to steal their thunder, but we had some time there, so go ahead.
Thanks for those comments. Jamie, have it pulled up? Appears so. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, since I'm not on the Zoom call, I don't believe like Senator Larson and Rothfuss can see this.
I don't believe it's showing up on the Zoom, no.
So I just need to join the Zoom meeting real quick.
Yeah, okay, we'll keep talking. I'll keep dishing this while we're doing this.
Senator Kaye, the floor is yours. Other thoughts?
Well, this is what we would have, and this is obviously set up for the House. And we're gonna get it to you guys online and the public online in just a minute. We gotta join the Zoom call with Jamie's computer to make this work. And then we'll share that screen. What I'm trying to get at is, does this really add anything, especially if we decide we want to make the next step and make the toggle screen of the clerk an option for going out to the world?
And I would just say, I know the Senate for the past 4 years, the chief clerk, when they do a roll call, repeats your votes. In the House, we don't have our chief clerk repeat. So if you say aye or no, which has
It's
been
true.
difficult when people are listening online, whether how someone voted until the ultimate end of the vote, plus when you publish it. But in the Senate, someone can follow at home which way everyone's voting, which I think has been appreciated.
It has been appreciated, Mr. Chairman, and it's been kind of a nice touch, actually, that I think we do appreciate. Obviously, it's
All
a
right,
bigger deal in the House.
we are up. So, Mr. Schaub, take it away.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe you can see this. I can't tell from in the room if you could see the top heading or not.
Yep, general government appropriations.
Okay, so the way we set this up is you would see the bill number and the catch title and see what kind of reading or action you're on. For this sample thing we showed, introduce bills, and then it says vote required of a 2/3, so that'd be an introduction type vote. If the vote would be on third reading, that would say third reading, final passage, instead of say introduce bills, and then the vote required would have said majority of the elected, so you would see what kind of vote is required to pass the bill. And over on the right side is a very, in my opinion, a very important feature where it says vote closed. When the vote is open and they are doing the roll call, if somebody took a picture of that, it wouldn't be the official record. As you all are aware, people change their vote as the vote is open. So if somebody took a screenshot or anything of that, that isn't necessarily how someone voted. When it says vote closed, that would be the official roll call of that chamber. And then you see the tally up across the top, ayes, nays, excuse by different color, and that would change as the vote's occurring. And down below, you can see the color coded that we did for the ayes and nays, where you could see green, red, white, yellow. And then you also see down in the names whether they voted aye, or if they're excused or whatever, you also see that letter down below with the color. And the kind of the envision of this, if you so elected do it, would be you wouldn't change any rules at all. Basically, while the chief clerk is calling the roll, this would display on the chamber floor, and the whole process would stay very similar. You would just have this showing up in the chamber, and you could see the tally as it happens. All the names would start off in white, and as they're going through the roll, they would start changing colors based off the vote. And at the end, as you all are aware, there's usually hardly ever an absent because they're marked as excused, so you probably won't have any white by the end of the roll call. And if you have any questions on any of this, I'm available to answer the questions.
Questions, Representative Yin, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Jamie. So if we implemented this and we had it on the YouTube feed, would it be someone on the clerk's staff responsibility to make sure that this shows up, or would it be your responsibility? How would that be managed by LSO?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, where we are at right now on that is actually a very cheap solution to the YouTube side. Is, as you're aware, there's cameras in the chamber. Is we could, when the chief clerk is talking, when her mic is on and she's doing that, we would have a set condition where a camera would just focus on the board. And on the YouTube, we would see that board based off the camera in the chamber. It's a low quality, I guess, thing, but it wouldn't require any staff intervention or anything like that.
Let me check online and see if Senator Roth or Senator Larson, both good? Any questions? Looking both good? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, Senator Larson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to just say this is fantastic. This is something I was wanting for like 8 years. I don't see any problem with it, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Senator Case, your mic's on, just checking. Thoughts? Nope? Yep.
Well, I failed to see a lot of advantage here if we actually were to make this kind of a display or the clerk's screen available online at the same time and also available to the members at the same time. I don't see the advantages to hanging this in the chamber as long as we all have the same information and it's available and available to the public. You know, using the rules we have now and doing this, it'll work perfectly fine. But what I see happening is that we will start saying, hey, we need to leave this vote open and we need to go to the next step of inputting from our desks. And then the games start because you'll toggle one way, toggle the other way, and you wait to see what other people are do. And And if you don't think this doesn't happen, go visit the US Congress, because this is, it is such a lack of decorum, votes flipping around, blocks turning one way, then this way, running around negotiating on the floor. It cuts the bottom out of it. This would certainly work, and it satisfies people, but it doesn't provide them any more information than we could provide using the web resources we could do right now. And the truth is, this only gains us 1 minute in terms of what's available on a recorded vote.
Okay, other thoughts?
Yes,
Yep, Jamie,
Mr.
go ahead.
Chairman, I just wanted to clarify what Senator Case just said. This would not change the real-time vote going out onto the website. We would still have to post the action. All this would be doing is when the chief clerk is processing electronically the vote, it would just show up on this screen, and that's it. We would still have to go through the process of getting it out to the website.
Agree to that, Senator Case?
Yeah, I certainly agree to that. I didn't mean to speak in this. This is just a display convention for what the clerk is doing right at the time. What I'm trying to point out is that this display convention is open to manipulation down the road as we decide to leave it open and make input from our desk and cut out the roll call completely. And at that point, it's just a natural way to go, I think. Why do we need this person reading this off when we can input at our desk? Because it's right there. So anyway, I agree with you, Jamie.
Are there ways in general to put this on the YouTube site while the roll call is happening? Maybe we don't need to see it in the chamber. And I think it's only 4 minutes until it's, put somewhere and public, but there are people at home, at least in the House, when you're not repeating votes, they don't know how people are voting until the final vote that it passed or not, and they don't know what the tally is for at least 5 minutes. Is there a possibility you could put this in the corner of a YouTube broadcast?
So, Mr. Chairman, it would be real time if we just had the cameras capturing it. It's just not the same quality as this screen here. The other option would be like what I'm doing right now, where staff would have to share their screen on their computer, which is kind of a tedious process, as you just observed.
Unless it was set up that way. I mean, otherwise, when you have the roll call, at least in the House, you're just kind of looking at the chamber and people are voting and you can't necessarily see who it is. And you watch people moving around if you know who's sitting where, but it doesn't give you more or less insight into the process probably, as this might, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Case.
Is it possible to take that feed from this toggle switch, which is the screen output of the clerk, and have it available online, not necessarily nested in the live feed from the chamber, but maybe for people to pull up separately if they wish? It could be nested. It could be on our website as a toggle option. Where could we go with that?
On the fly, Mr. Schaub.
Mr. Chairman, the voting system is a very isolated system, so there's nothing attached to it. The way the presiding officers are able to see it is basically the same way you just have an HDMI cable or whatever that's extended to the computer or the monitor that's sitting on that desk. And that's the only reason you have a connection there. But typically, we don't want to expose that voting machine to other things.
Senator Case.
Of course, that makes total sense. We want this machine to be isolated and have integrity. But that feed, which is just a picture of a screen, theoretically, couldn't that be shared with the public at the same time in some way if it was protected from access coming back through from hacking or whatever? And I think the camera idea might be the right idea.
Mr. Chairman, the way I think that could be done is by sharing that computer screen with the Zoom, being the Zoom call. I don't personally think that is a better alternative to this, just because that application is not user-friendly or anything like that. There's big buttons on there the clerk to click on for I know this is a visually pleasing representation of the vote. And
For you.
but I'm just saying that is not something that you would present. I mean, you can do it, but it wouldn't look as nice. We're professional.
So, Mr. Chairman, couldn't we get to a place where it looked however we wanted it to look and it was capable of being shared? And so essence, every person in Wyoming would have the ability to look at the same information here, same time that the clerk is addressing it. And yet we don't hang these things in the chamber and open them up to being game down the road.
That is possible. Director Obrecht.
So, Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman Case, I hear what you're asking, and I think we could do that. What we could do is this display we're seeing be broadcast to YouTube. But it would require some additional work on our part right now if it wasn't just directly displayed in the chamber. And we haven't figured out what that would require at this point in time, but I am sure it's possible.
Representative Young, follow up?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think the only other suggestion would be, is it possible to just make this a public-facing website that's just a separate link that says vote board viewable here?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yen, this is built as a web application. And technically right now, if you went out to a website, you would be able to view it. So if we exposed that web address, people could do that.
But it would still be secure. Because it's really just broadcasting one way. There'd be no way to manipulate.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. They would just be seeing the results of the chief clerk. They wouldn't have any connection to that. They would just see the results.
Go ahead.
Can we reach out to Senator Larson a little bit? He's most enamored with this form of display. What about the idea that we'd all have this display and you could have it on your computer, but we just wouldn't hang it in the chamber? Is there any thought about that? Is that just against what you think?
Senator Larson, thoughts on that? Do you want a billboard in the chamber, or do you just want to be able to look at it on your screen?
Mr. Chairman, either way, we're moving forward, but I think I would prefer it in the chamber, but it is okay if we did it on YouTube. I would guess that all our legislators would just be having their computer open to that all the time during votes. But I think this looks really good, and I think the legislators deserve it in the chambers. I don't want to change any of the procedures, that's for sure. I think as soon as the chief clerk says the vote is closed, it should be just the way we're doing it now. Obviously, everyone has a chance to change their vote before that happens, and quite often when people are counting on their fingers, it happens anyway. I think this is wonderful, and I think we should bring it forward to the Management Council and see if it can go even further. Thank you.
We ask for a motion. Representative Banks, some thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would tend to agree. From what I'm hearing is that this is the easiest ability is to have what we've seen here put up on the wall of the chamber and have a camera zoom in and see it. I think the notion that just because it's on our computers and not up on the wall, then I think the games, if they're going to take place, are going to take place regardless if it's on the wall, if it's on our screen. And I think the ability to have it up there so we can see it, the public can see it, LSO can have a simple way of zooming in on it when we cast our votes. I mean, I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing here on the screen, and I think I would be in favor of moving forward to have it on the walls of the chamber at this time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
You know, I guess I don't really see what we're solving overall. I mean, to be clear, this looks nice. It's a nice approach to it, but we've been talking about this for years, and I've never really understood what the value is to either us or the public to be able to see this in real time as I think about voting. Unless, I don't want, for example, somebody to be text messaging me while I'm voting. In fact, on third reading, we're not even supposed to be doing email or text messaging. I know that we don't follow that rule always, but I don't have any interest in getting contacted based on my vote once it gets posted, so that somebody can tell me I voted wrong in real time instead of 1 minute later. That's the only thing that I see this doing, candidly. I don't know what we're accomplishing by having a big board. I already write down votes if I'm interested in the vote. So if I'm paying careful attention because it's going to be a close vote, I'll have a piece of paper where I'll write down good Senator Larson's vote and everyone else's vote. I know what's going on. And then it gets posted within a minute once the vote's finalized, which seems appropriate, so the public knows right away. They just don't necessarily know unless they're listening. And again, for the Senate, it's being broadcast in real time. So when I cast my aye or no vote, our chief clerk will say it. If somebody can't hear me, they can usually hear me, but they can't necessarily hear everybody. So the chief clerk will repeat it. So I'll ask Senator Larson and maybe others that are proponents of this, what is changing here? What are we accomplishing that makes the legislative process better for the people of Wyoming by having a big board that has my name on it and says how I voted?
Senator Case, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to tag on too. I want to ask very explicitly, what good is it that you know how your colleagues voted? If you want to follow that, you can have a piece of paper. We're offering to put it on the screen. But what does how your colleagues vote have to do with how you're going to vote? That's the part that I don't get. I know how I'm going to vote when the vote starts. It really doesn't matter how many are green or red on that board. It's not going to change my vote. I mean, the only conceivable reason to change your vote or let that influence your vote is if you're planning to maneuver to be on a vote for reconsideration. And that is such a rare event. And that's what the tally sheets are really good for. But we're literally offering to have this on the computer and for everybody. It seems like a good compromise to me, rather than put it on the chamber.
Representative Banks, thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think, at least in my mind, it has less to do with how my colleagues vote, because I'm the same way. I could care less of how they vote. I'm going to vote for what my constituents want. It goes back to public perception and transparency. We just had the same discussion when it comes to the media folks. The media people want to be in there for increased transparency. If we can have public perception that we are transparent, we're not trying to hide anything, I believe that if that accomplishes that, then we're doing our job. We're not trying to hide anything. And so I think for me, it's more about the public perception. We're giving it in real time. They can see it. In the House, they don't know how we vote when they're listening. We don't have somebody to announce it, but if we have that camera that zooms in and they can see the votes, I mean, we can go to the public saying we got nothing to hide in the Wyoming legislature. Come and watch and be involved and engaged in the process as much as you can. So that's, in my mind, that's more about what this is to me, and less about how our colleagues vote and that.
So, but
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator
let's be clear. This doesn't change any of that information. You know, if this was real-time available online for everybody and at your own desk, it provides no more transparency than having something on the wall. There's, and we can't go down the road here and say, if we don't want the board on the deal, we're not being transparent, because that's the implication here. And that's just not true. We're offering to make the chief clerk's screen in some form available to the world at the same time, as if it was on the wall of the chamber. And that achieves the same thing, and people are being just as transparent down either path.
That's why I guess I don't necessarily understand why there needs to be a billboard in a chamber, but I do think it's important for people following at home to be able to, see how their legislators are voting. There was one time 10 years ago, tracking votes, roll call came out, and I could not figure out who I had wrong. Went to the chief clerk and said, I have it failing by one vote, you have it passing. And they actually went back, and she had, no offense to that chief clerk at that time, had hit the wrong button. And so in that level of transparency and accountability, having more eyes on that screen, because, if you've ever had to watch a chief clerk up there, I don't know if she's still in here, it's a lot, right? People are talking and yelling and not paying attention, and it is conceivable to hit the wrong button. And so having another set of eyes on it at least is not the worst thing ever. But I don't necessarily know I'd want an electronic billboard in the chamber, but I do think it's important for the public to be able to have that broadcast unless the chief clerk is repeating votes. Again, the Senate, you get all the votes repeated. People at home can follow along how each one of you are voting. In the House, we don't do that. It would take another 2 minutes. So for the transparency immediate, I think that's helpful. But ultimately, we're looking if there's going to be a request that we're putting to Management Council. Representative Yan, and then I'll go to Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just wait until if there's a motion to talk about my thoughts.
Then we'll go to Senator Larson. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I keep track of, just like Senator had mentioned a bit ago, and I don't really care how the legislators vote, like was mentioned, but it is vital that it is easy to see to the public. Obviously, like I said before, I'd prefer it in the chambers, but if we can get it on YouTube as it's going on, that would work too. But the main thing is there's the web page is easy to not manipulate, but to go to and figure out how people vote. Obviously, like it's presented, like we said, really quick within minutes. But for a lot of people, it is a difficult site to go to if you don't go to it often. So I like the discussion, and you heard what I would prefer, but I think we're going down the right track. Thank you.
Representative Banks, you're outside, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trying to do two things at once here, but yeah, I'll just clarify my comments. I would agree with Senator Larson. That's my preference as well, but I think a step forward now is a step forward, and so I would be amenable to the preference of the committee as long as there's something we are doing that is in that direction.
So ultimately, looking if we're making a recommendation to Management Council and what that recommendation might be, if we believe the technology we have in place to be able to make those recommendations now, and whether that's for the 2025 session, whether that's a start of an investigation to, look at all of the odds and ends to make this work. I'm kind of looking for a motion from someone on how to proceed, at least take a step forward and continue the conversation. Senator Larson, you want to make the motion? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we take what was shown by Jamie and put it on, I think it's a YouTube or whatever, in what do I want to say, in real time, and go that route, present that to Management Council.
Okay. Senator Case, is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, and then discussion, Senator Case.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of flexibility to how that's accomplished and mock-ups and things. But in essence, to move towards that, not necessarily for this session, although it'd be great if it was for this session, but like to encourage us going in that direction.
I think we could ask it to be on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Jamie.
the way the motion is now, I just want you to be aware of the impact on staff is the way the motion is now, it would require someone from the staff, whenever there is a roll call vote, to share their screen on YouTube. And then as soon as the vote's over, to stop sharing it so it goes back to the cameras. I just want you to be aware of that.
Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, or, we could interpret the motion to be this: to display the vote total in real time in a manner in which we find technologically feasible. What we could also do potentially is have a link on our webpage to the clerk's voting screen. So you would actually go to that website. It wouldn't be on YouTube. It would be a separate website for the House or Senate clerk. And you'd be able then, when a vote is open, we'd populate it with what Jamie showed.
I was trying to get at. I don't know about the maker of the main motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree that that sounds great. I don't want to make it specific. I think we all know the direction. Whatever works. Thank you.
And certainly that would give you a month, Director, to fine tune what could be possible and make a more formal presentation and to Management Council of what's achievable and how it might work. Because if you have an immediate motion on the floor for a roll call on an amendment, that might be more difficult than saying, the third reading every day will be on there. So, because I know the chief clerk has to pivot very quickly in those situations, and we would just have to have somebody also quickly pivot to be able to flip the camera as well. But you can go through and research all that and figure out what's achievable with existing staff, right, Jamie?
Mr. Chairman, the way this is designed now, all we would need to do is have a link on the website that goes to the House or a link that goes to the Senate. And whenever the chief clerk opened the vote, this would display what I just showed you. Because that's all we were going to do in the chamber, because this is actually a web page that I'm showing you today. So basically, we just need to have a link to this web page for the House and a link to this web page for the Senate, and it would be out there in the public.
Let's try that.
Well,
Mr. Chairman?
I heard a whole lot there. Let's go to Senator Rothfuss first.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Jamie, on that, how is the data being populated in real time?
Jamie, go ahead.
There is, in the way the developer, or Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, the way the development is done is when the action happens from the chief clerk of clicking or touching the box of aye or no or whatever, there's like a messaging bus or whatever that's getting sent to Azure, and that's being picked up in real time.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's already available, or you have to do that integration?
That is, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that is the work that's happening currently on that enhancement I talked about. What I showed you today was just a mock-up of what the page would look like, but that's the work that's currently being done.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the only question I would have then, this seems like it totally satisfies the interest, exactly what Jamie described. I see Senator Larson nodding his head. That seems like an appropriate product that doesn't lead to any of the concerns that have been raised. It certainly doesn't bother me in any way, but I think it satisfies the interest. Is that accurate?
From Senator Larson, I guess he's shaking his head yes.
Okay.
So let me make sure, so the chief clerk is inputting stuff in the system all the time and getting votes ready. That would all be not live streamed through the entire day. All of the setup that goes in, there would be a way to just toggle it on during any type of formal vote to take over the screen, and somebody would still have to be responsible to do that. Otherwise, someone all day is going to watch your input, all the bills and what's coming forward, et cetera. That's achievable.
Mr. Chairman, the way we had discussed this for the board in the Senate would work just the same way for the public, is basically this screen would show the calendar that's been shown in the Senate for the last couple years. And whenever the chief clerk opens the vote, that would trigger an event for it to switch from the calendar to this vote display. And then after she closes the vote, or after the chief clerk closes the vote, there'd probably be a timer of like, say, 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, it would just roll back to the calendar until the next vote is opened.
So, Mr. Chairman, quick follow-up on that.
Okay, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
So if we're not putting it on the board though, Jamie, and it's going on a website, are you suggesting then that any roll call vote, every roll call vote will end up on the website? That's what I'm taking away, is that every roll call vote would end up on this website available in real time.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that is correct. Any roll call activity that the chief clerk does would be available on this website.
Senator Case?
And Mr. Chairman, I think this sounds great, but I would like to hear from our chief clerks that this is in any way, if you don't mind, Ms. Talbot, Chief Clerk Talbot.
Welcome, House Chief Clerk. Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman. I don't know if the Senate Chief Clerk is still online, and she certainly has much more experience, but this would really be training and trying to figure out how this might work, because there's an awful lot that does happen on those screens. That's a little bit bumbly, and, you know, trying to figure out orders of bills and the agenda and calendar and stuff. But for the most part, I put my faith and trust in LSO IT, and if they say it can be done, then I believe that.
And
Question for the Chief Clerk. Senator Case.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It doesn't feel negative to you that we're looking over your shoulder or something like that? I mean,
Mr. Chairman, it's a policy decision, of course, for this committee. It's certainly a change from the way I've been trained to do it, but again, it's just a policy decision for you all.
and Mr. Chairman, just continue. You know, it might possibly help when there's errors by accident. I mean, it might expose them quicker. But
Mr. Chairman, I believe that that is true, and Jamie just indicated that my role really won't change. And it has happened, of course, that, you know, in that voting, it is just a touch screen, of course, and mistakes do happen, and typically they're caught, you know, immediately, you know, when you hit that button. But I think it does make more, you know, more double check, I guess, for those votes.
I have her. Seeing none. Thanks, Kitty. All right, other comments before we vote on the motion? Representative Yun.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm fine with the motion as is. I think this is actually more achievable than the screen solution. And I know, I mean, we heard from at least 2 senators, but I know that there are House members that would adamantly oppose putting up large screens in the chamber. They've done it before. I mean, many members see the chamber as essentially a special place, a very special place. And we have things like the stained glass, we have the huge pieces of art, and that putting gigantic screens essentially diminishes the specialness of the chamber. And so I'm really just voicing those concerns. I do think that having the real-time vote on a website is great. I think that's fine. I think that there are members, including myself, that have gone up and looked at the speaker's screen, because the speaker has the same vote, and I assume that's the same in the presiding officer's chamber in the Senate, to see the vote in real time. So I'm not opposed to having that available for both the public and for members to be able to see that on their own screens.
So with that, we do, I guess, have a motion on the floor. I should take some public comment because I haven't yet. Is there any public comment on a motion to Management Council to be able to live stream the votes on YouTube?
that's not exactly it.
Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Okay, how about restate the motion and then I'll ask for
Well,
public
I just
comment.
want to make sure that everybody, because I think we may be talking about 2 different things here. We do not currently have the capability to to live stream the votes onto YouTube. The only way we can do that at the moment for for this coming session was that option that Mr. Schwab talked about. We called it the cheap solution of pointing the camera onto the TV monitor in the Senate. The option that you have before you, I believe, and is practical for this coming session, is to provide a link on our website to the House and Senate roll call vote pages so that you're going to see this example that Jamie displayed. That's all we're talking about here right now. We do not have the ability to put them on the YouTube stream as we sit here today.
Got it. You have 3 people nodding their heads. So the motion on the floor is to set up a separate link on our website so people during voting could view that link in real time. Discussion on that. Oh, actually, that's public comment. See no one jumping up and no one online real quick. Nope. All right. All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. That looks unanimous. All right. Anything else to come on the topic of electronic voting and displaying votes in chambers?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to commend the committee for thinking about this and staff for working on this, and Wendy, and we're going to hear more from NCSL, how other chambers operate. But I think this is really a big step forward that kind of helped everybody out. And I'm really proud of you guys for coming up with it, staff for their hard work. Really good solution, I think.
Okay. We're at the point of general public comment on anything related to legislative facilities, technology, or process. I certainly have some questions on what's going on in the facilities with these very large wooden boards showing up everywhere, but we'll save that till Management Council. Any other public comment?
I do have one item.
Like how you catch me at the very end. Go ahead, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, it's been a great personal privilege to serve with you as co-chairman of many different committees, corporations, this committee, revenue. We were co-chairman on revenue. And so I want to just express my appreciation for your dedication, your hard work, your tolerance of me all these years. And from a bigger perspective, I think you've provided a great service to the state of Wyoming, and we're very pleased. And we went kind of out and we got you something. So thank you, Anthony. So, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
This is, you probably know this place, but it's a picture of the Capitol. And you could probably take it apart and we'd all autograph it, however you want to do it. But we want to present this to you.
Stand. Okay, thanks.
You might as well stand, and we're just all very grateful. Let's stand and give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
All right. It has been, what, 12, 14 years in this committee, and we've co-chaired it for at least 8. And there's no $1 billion revenue shortfall in this committee, so those were the fun years of co-chairing with you, Senator. With that, staff, anything else? Okay, we'll look forward to seeing you at Management Council here in about 3